Happy birthday, Awakening Church. It's so hard to believe that already we're celebrating our 8th birthday as a church. And for some, you're curious, you're going like, well, why in the world does this church have a birthday and not an anniversary? Well, we believe that 8 years ago, God birthed a movement called Awakening to reach this generation. Now, normally on this day, we would throw a huge party. It would be one service outdoor all together. It would be so fun to be all together. I wish we could do that. We're doing something a little different, this drive-through party. I look forward to seeing you there. But since we can't gather all together in one place, I thought maybe I could take you to 8 places and share God's faithfulness over the last few years. You see, all these places are significant in the life of our church, in the life of many of you, as they signify God's faithfulness through every season. In fact, this is so important. Don't miss this. We must look back and remember God's faithfulness in order to move forward with confidence, even in the midst of uncertainty. You see, the problem is, for you, for me, we get this, we know this. The problem is we humans are a forgetful species, aren't we? We have these moments with God that we think we'll never forget, and He shows up, and then somehow along the way it just begins to fade away in our minds, and we just tend to forget how God had shown up and worked because we get caught up in the moment. Isn't it true? There's these moments for you that you thought you would never forget, and then they just have kind of faded into the background of your lives. Well, what's amazing is if you read the scriptures, you'll see that God intentionally set up moments and monuments to remind us of His faithfulness and how He works in our lives. And you'll see the leaders of God's people do the same things because they know, and God knows, we're forgetful species. We tend to lose sight of how He worked. And so you got to intentionally set up these moments. You got to set up these remembering stones, these monuments. And every time you walk past that and you see that monument, it reminds you of how God had worked. And then if you're walking with your family, you would begin to tell your kids the story of how God had shown up. In fact, there's this one story in the Old Testament. It's in the book of 1 Samuel. And the people of Israel at this moment are, oh man, they're subjugated to oppression and exploitation by the Philistine nation. And honestly, the Israelites had wandered away from God. And in this moment, there's a national revival. They're returning to God. They're repenting. And they're all gathered together and returning to God and repenting. And the prophet Samuel's leading them through this. Well, their enemies, the Philistines, they seize this moment and seize it as an opportunity to take them out. And so they get their army together and they're starting to advance. Well, you can imagine for the Israelites, they're thrown into a panic. And Samuel the prophet says this, hey, don't panic. Don't panic. Pray to your God. Don't panic. Pray. And God showed up big time. As the Philistines were on their way, they hadn't even gotten there, God throws them into a panic and into chaos, and the Israelites are actually able to have a victory where sure defeat was in front of them. And Samuel, being the wise leader, and realizing we're a forgetful species. He did what we need to do probably more often than we realize we need to do it. He set up a monument, a remembering stone, so that you would never forget how God had showed up and moved in this moment. The text says it this way. It says, then Samuel took a stone and set it up. It's between Mizpah and Shin, and he named it Ebenezer, saying, thus far the Lord has helped us. Samuel takes this stone, sets it up, and he names it Ebenezer, which means the Lord has helped us. Every time you pass by this rock, I just want you to remember, thus far, the Lord has helped us. And if he's helped us this far, he's going to help us all the way. See, we must look back to move forward. We must look back and remember his faithfulness in order to move forward with confidence, even in the midst of uncertainty. And so I want to share with you 8 places, 8 spots where we're looking back and seeing God's faithfulness in the story of Awakening Church to remind us this is our Ebenezer. This is our story. This is the story of what God has done in us and through us, reminding us that he's not done with us. And so, would you take a listen to This Is Our Story, one Ebenezer at a time. Our story begins right here at Westgate Church. It was here 13 years ago that a new ministry began to reach college and young adults called Awakening. Come on in. What started out as a small group of college and young adults gathering together over the course of 5 years grew to one of the largest young adults ministry in Northern California. Incredibly humbling to see what God did in this place. This is a space that God did deep formation in our lives. Lessons learned, like God will always work deeply in you before he works significantly through you. I still remember when Steve Clifford sat me down in his office and said, "Ryan, would you be willing to plant a church for us?" And I remember saying, "No, we love it here. This is amazing." And yet a year later, God had stirred and moved on our hearts and confirmed for Jenny and I to step out and plant Awakening as a church. And yet, Westgate is our Ebenezer. It's our Ebenezer of formation, of responding to the call of God to plant Awakening as a church. Thus far, the Lord has helped us. Those early years were filled with excitement and fear. We were excited about what God was going to do, and yet afraid. We'd never done this before. We'd never been here. In fact, we had no idea where we were even going to meet. For 6 months, we prayed and sought, knocked on doors, made phone calls, asked everyone. And then finally, there was a place we thought just might be the place. It was an abandoned nightclub called Angels Nightclub. We like downtown because we're a church about reaching this generation. And so about 7 or 8 of us headed down here to do a prayer walk. Clearly remember, we came down, we parked, and we started to pray and look around, and maybe this is the place God has for this new church. And then something really strange happened. We were looking down, and somebody walking towards us, they looked so odd. They looked like a zombie. In fact, as they got closer, you realized they were dressed up like a zombie. And then another person dressed up like a zombie, and then another, and then another, and then another, and then pretty soon, this group of 7 or 8 of us that came down to pray for an awakening were in a sea of zombies all around us. And it just so happened the day we came to pray was a zombie convention right downtown in San Jose here. And I just feel like it was one of those moments where God was saying, this is what you're going to be about. Like the word angel means messenger, and I feel like God gave us a message, a confirmation that we're about awakening to new life in Christ, about bringing dead things back to life in the name of Jesus. Like all around us are people that are sleepwalking, that are spiritually dead, and we're going to launch a church that is going to be about bringing new life and awakening new life to those all around us. And so, Angels, we didn't end up meeting here. But Angels is our Ebenezer of confirmation. Our confirmation of calling of what God was going to do and use this movement to bring about an awakening to this generation. And if God had answered our prayers at Angels, we would have missed out on all that He had for us. I spent my afternoons driving trying to find a location because it was less than 2 months before we were going to launch and we still didn't have a place to meet. And so I would drive the city looking, and I remember being on Bascom seeing this brand new community center that was just being built, and so it wasn't even ready for us. We couldn't use it as a building, but I pulled through the other side of the parking lot and noticed that there was a school tucked away. Never would have seen it, didn't know it existed. And as I pulled closer to it, realized they had a brand new theater right on the front of the campus and lots of parking. Well, could God be in this? Could this be the place? And as I began to investigate and discover that the person who was the activities director here just so happened years before this be on a high school ministry staff team with us at Westgate. And so we had this deep relationship, and over the summer they had a brand new principal that just started, and if we had asked at a different time, the answer would have been yet another of the many no's that I received. But because it was at this particular moment, we got the yes. God had set everything up in the perfect place, in the perfect timing, with the right people, and this became the place where Awakening is called home for the last 8 years. From the very beginning, we said this is more than a place to meet, but a people to love. We began to wrestle with this question: what would it look like to love this school the way we think Jesus would? And so for the past 8 years, we've had such the great joy and honor of being able to partner and love this campus, bringing beautification to the campus and doing service projects and, supporting teachers and helping kids not only financially and with food and education. I mean, literally tens of thousands of dollars to support and love and connect and just be the church here. You see, Del Mar is our Ebenezer. Del Mar is our Ebenezer of God providing just at the right time in His way. We didn't start out with much. In fact, we just had a box truck. It fit all of our stuff, our kids and our production. We didn't have a storage unit. We didn't even have an office. In fact, my home was literally home base for the first 2 years. I mean, we did our staff meetings here. We did leadership meetings here. In fact, we had moved the box truck into my driveway and unload everything, and my whole front yard would be covered with our church stuff. My neighbors would come out and wonder, are we moving? No, we're not moving. We're telling them we planted this church. And you know what I love about this? I love those moments. I love where we began, and it's an Ebenezer. It's an Ebenezer that you don't need much. You don't need fancy for God to work. You just take the little that you have and you offer it to Him, and He multiplies it. And we've just watched, thus far, the Lord has helped us. Now, 2 years is a long time. And 2 years of everything happening in our house, it wore us out. In fact, after 2 years, we're done. We were just maxed out. And I know in this season, you get that when the work and home blur and there's not boundaries, and we were exhausted. And we were just crying out, God, we need a space. We can't afford office space, but God, you've provided every step of the way. And so we began to pray specifically, God, would you provide an office space for us where we could host gatherings, where we could park our trucks as close to Del Mar. And then I noticed a church not far from my house, not far from Del Mar, and gave them a call and said, is there any chance we could rent some space from you? This is Dwell Church. right around the corner from our house. It's now called Willow Glen Baptist Church. And I reached out to them in those early days and wondered, is there any space here that we could rent to have an office? And they generously let us have just 2 medium-sized rooms here where we could office and do our mid-sized gatherings. I mean, it just was such an incredible answer to prayer. We could park our trucks here and we could gather and meet, and everything moved out of my house. And now here's the funny part was we moved into this realizing, or failed to realize, that we didn't even have money for office furniture. And so it's amazing how God knows our needs before we even know them. And literally, as we had signed the agreement for this space, I got a phone call from somebody in our church saying, "Hey Ryan, I'm shutting down one of my offices. Do you guys happen to need any office furniture?" And unbelievable, we picked up this office furniture and it looked like we had purchased it just for our space, of how God showed up and provided. And here, this was our home base for 4 years. This is where Protege launched. This is where Mama's group met, men's group met. We had groups and leadership meetings and all those things. I mean, such an incredible foundation for us. And Dwell is our Ebenezer. It's our Ebenezer that the Lord has heard our cry. That He has met us and listened and moved mightily on our behalf. I could tell you story after story of answers to prayers that we prayed in desperation right here, and how God has showed up. Thus far, the Lord has helped us. And here's what's incredible. As God has so consistently answered our prayers, He's actually used our community to be an answer to prayer to others. We believe that the church should lead the way in unleashing extravagant generosity to a hurting and broken world, because we have such an extravagantly generous God. And one of the significant ways that we do this is our partnership with UCI and Jean and Christy Montpremier and what they're doing in Haiti. In fact, we sent a bunch of teams over the years to Haiti. We're supposed to send a team this last year, and right before they left, COVID and everything hit. And we've actually gotten to partner and send hundreds of thousands of dollars. Let that sink in. Hundreds of thousands of dollars to provide clean drinking water for those who didn't have it, to provide education for elementary, high school, and college, to help bring the gospel to people and planting churches, and to provide food for those who are in need. It's humbling to get to be connected to such an incredible ministry there in Haiti, and to be partners with them, family with them, in awakening this generation to new life in Jesus. You see, Haiti is our Ebenezer that God has entrusted to us to be a blessing for those around us. And thus far, the Lord has been our help. Well, we eventually outgrew the office space at Dwell. And so once again, we started praying and looking for a space to meet our needs, to allow us to do the ministry God had called us to do. And so yet again, God blew us away with what He had for us. As we were looking and praying, we came across this space, and it literally was across the street from Del Mar High School. So when we were meeting in person, it just opened up things on Sunday that we couldn't have done at any other time, where we could have our youth meet over here and other ministries meet during our services. It's literally 3 times bigger than our space at Dwell, and opened us for mid-sized gatherings and classes, School of Faith, and Protege here. And when COVID hit, not having a location, having a space that we could set up as a studio, to be able to be church and do church together during this season. I mean, it's just incredible how God has shown up in ways that we didn't even know how to pray, in moments that we didn't even know were going to come our way. And it's just yet again, this new office space for us is our Ebenezer of the God who goes above and beyond. The God, as we call out and pray, He doesn't just answer in that immediate. He actually sees beyond and goes above and beyond what we could ask or imagine. And He likes to spoil His kids, and we feel spoiled in this place. Well, and speaking of above and beyond, many of you remember almost 2 years ago we did this campaign to raise and pledged $1.3 million so that we could find a long-term location to expand our ministry of what God's doing here at Awakening. Well, amazingly so, we've already seen 1.4 come in on that. And last year at this time, we thought we found the building. In fact, I'm standing in front of a building that we thought at this time we were going to meet in, 25,000 square feet, huge warehouse. And we were working on getting all our ducks in a row, working on getting, the architecture plans and the finances and all those things dialed in. In October, we had it ready. And we go back to the landlord, and he had just signed the lease. And we were devastated. I mean, just devastated. We just thought, oh my goodness, we've been praying, we've been searching. We thought this is the next location for us. And then it was gone like that. Now, one of the amazing things is the delay of God is often His blessing in disguise. See, God, again, knew exactly what we need. God knew what was going to come ahead. And just imagine if we had signed a lease in October and then COVID hit in March. And we'd have this big warehouse space with a very big lease and a lot of pressure that we couldn't use, or a lot of pressure, that to pay. And God protected us. God put us in such a position. Actually, now I think is a divine setup. That now that retail space is now at a low as far as demand, and we have finances in the bank, and by God's grace our giving is strong, that we can actually get a space much cheaper than we would have a year ago. And just see God's hand and His protection and how He's working and moving every step of the way. This may not be our next building, but this is one of our Ebenezers. This building's our Ebenezer, that God's with us, directing us every step of the way. And so you have confidence and excited about where He's leading in the steps ahead. I don't know what the future holds. Shoot, I don't even know what 2020 holds or has in store for us. But here's what I do know. I do know that God is faithful. He has met us and led us every step of the way. Every step of the way He's provided. Every step of the way He's met us. Every step of the way He's gone above and beyond. And so I don't know what the future holds, but here's what I'm confident of. God's with us. God's faithful. God's working and moving, and we can trust Him in this season. And, even thinking about this year and these moments, I can't wait to look back. And I'm not sure what it is, but there's going to be something that we're going to look back from this moment and go, this is our Ebenezer. In this moment in 2020, this is how He showed up, and we don't ever want to forget it. I can't wait to tell that story on the other side. Samuel, he took that rock and set it up and named it Ebenezer. Thus far, the Lord has helped us. We are a forgetful species. We need those Ebenezers. And every time you pass by that building, you pass by Westgate, you pass by Del Mar, you pass by our new offices, and well, may it remind you that God is faithful and that He is working. See, we must look back to move forward. We must look back and remember His faithfulness, His activity, in order to move forward with confidence in the midst of these uncertain days. And so here's what I want you to do. Would you ask this question? What are the Ebenezers in your life? You got to hear some of the Ebenezers for us as Awakening Church, and for some, that's a part of your story as well. But what are the Ebenezers in your life? Where has He been faithful to you in your story? Where has He shown up? Would you do this? Would you take time today and literally write it down? And I'm saying today, I want you to do this today and write it down and get into the details. God is in the details of these things, of the way He shows up so personally. And after you write it down, would you share it with someone? Maybe it's with a friend. Maybe it's with a roommate. Maybe it's with your spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend. And if you have a family, would you do this? Would you get your family around the table? And would you sit down and you just begin to tell the story of God's faithfulness, of how He has showed up in your life through the years? And then just say, thus far, the Lord has helped us. He has been faithful then. He is faithful now. And He will faithfully lead us through this. This is our Ebenezer.